Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Satisfied Watch Collector podcast. My name is James, I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about resetting on your collecting philosophy for 2026. And it's the new year, so happy new year. I hope you had a great and relaxing time, maybe did something eventful, maybe not. I know I certainly did not, kind of stayed in and just relaxed and enjoyed the time. So yes, hopefully you had a good new year. If you are new to this podcast, please do like the show. That is my way of knowing that you are enjoying the content and enjoying what I'm doing. So please do like it if you enjoy this type of content. I create videos weekly, and I've also started doing a weekly podcast. So this is new for me. So I appreciate the feedback, any thoughts that you have, things that you would like, any show topics, anything like that. And do subscribe as well to the channel. So I do have, again, I have YouTube videos, and I also now have this podcast on Spotify. So if you're a podcast person, do subscribe to my Spotify account so that you can see when this podcast comes up. Because I wanted to have people, give people the ability to not just watch on YouTube, but also listen in a audio format on Spotify. So please like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. So let's dive into the topic. Again, we're talking about resetting for the year. And I've been pretty religious about kind of my own little ritual every year for the last several years now at this point. And it really consists of first stopping and taking some time to think back about the prior year. And of course, this podcast, we're talking about watches, but it's a very holistic reflection. So I'm looking at everything from career to finances to health to relationships to social life to charitable types of things, all the different aspects of life, and really reflecting on what did I accomplish in the prior year? Was I happy with that? What do I need to change for 2026? And I do think that there's a sense in which this also applies to watches as well. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because I want to talk about your watch collecting philosophy and what that looks like. And whether you're a newer collector, just kind of getting your feet wet in the space, or whether you're an experienced collector, I do think that there are some good points to keep in mind as you're developing, as you're refining your watch collecting philosophy. So to give you a couple of elements of my watch collecting philosophy right now, and then we'll dive deeper into some of these points. The first one would be, I'm looking for variety in my collection. And it's related to the budget piece of this, which we will talk about, because I do think that budget is relevant. You've got to start within your price range, because it makes no sense to shop for something that you either can't afford or won't be able to for a long, long time. And I would clarify or classify that as probably 5+ years. Like if you're looking at something 5+ years out, it's not bad to have something that's aspirational. I believe that's actually a really good thing, but you're not shopping actively for it. So I don't want to say don't waste your time, but start with what you can reasonably afford. It may be a stretch. It may be something that you have to work hard for. That's totally okay. That's what I think watches should be, honestly. And even to get into this conversation, we already have to recognize we're in a great place to be able to talk about luxury pieces of art that we wear on our wrist, when the truth is we've got phones for everything that we're talking about. We just do. And so when we're talking about luxury watches, we're already in a pretty great spot. So I'm going for diversity. I like having one watch per brand. I have committed to blue dials. That's just been, I often joke that I woke up one day and asked myself the meaning of life, and the answer was navy blue, and that's where I am now. So navy, blue dials of some shape or form. I shared in my last episode of the podcast my personal collection, kind of how I got to here. Um, and I guess use case is another big point. So we'll dive deeper into some of these topics because I do have a little bit of an order and sequence to them. But that's where I'm at right now. If I had to just like encapsulate kind of the keys, it would be one watch per brand. At least right now, we'll see if that changes ever. Um, it's got to be affordable. It's got to make sense within your budget and not compromise any of your long-term financial goals. And then the use case. It can't overlap too much, and we're gonna dive into some more of those topics as we go here. So let's talk about the budget. Let's talk about the budget. Right now for me this year, I've got a few personal things coming up. Right, I'm planning a wedding, my wedding, not a wedding, my wedding, in like mid 27. And so obviously from a financial perspective, that's going to be a big piece of what I'm allocating funds for in the next year to year and a half. So when it comes to 2026, for myself personally, I have two considerations, and one is something very much more entry level than I've ever looked at before, which is Citizen. So Citizen has some really interesting solar powered watches. You may be saying, James, you're supposed to be a luxury watch collector podcast. Why in the heck are you talking about Citizen? This is blasphemy, and I'm turning you off right now. Well, sorry if that's how you feel, but the reality is Citizen makes inexpensive watches for the most part. You can buy a Citizen for I think like anywhere from 50 to $100. At the bottom end of the range here. And don't get me wrong, they're accurate quartz watches that are inexpensive. And there's some interesting designs and things like that. That's not what I'm talking about, by the way, just so you know. What I'm looking at is they've got there's a 30th anniversary limited edition paper dial Citizen watch. Of course, it's blue. They have several of these anniversary edition watches, but the one that I'm looking at, of course, is blue. The dials are technically all unique because of the process that they use to actually create these like paper linen kind of dials. And the watches it's a perpetual calendar that don't need to be reset until the year 2100. So that's really interesting. Sorry, my dog's right at my feet here. He's kind of doing his own thing. So that's really interesting. And then they're made of they call it super hard titanium. So obviously it's a very high density material that is pretty scratch resistant. The one in particular that I'm looking at, I think is it's like a darker, almost like a DLC coated titanium. So it's got a little bit of a darker aesthetic to it. I don't recall actually I can find the model really quick here. Let's see. So this one, and I'm always hesitant to do these types of things because I'm like, I don't want people going out there and buying the watches that I'm looking at. But so it's a Citizen AQ 4106. So it's a solar titanium model. Pretty interesting stuff. Now, again, in the luxury collecting space, you may say like, well, that's not a luxury watch, and frankly, I don't care, because in a real sense, it still is. Again, that would be kind of the top of what Citizen would offer, and you're still talking about paying $2 or $3 for a watch, which, let's be real, again, we don't need these things. We can use our phones. Anything over a $50 Citizen or Timex or Hamilton is going to be a luxury watch. So let's just start with that. And I do think the question of at what point does aesthetics just becoming the defining factor for you and what you like versus other features that are a little bit more, luxury or premium, if you want to call them that. So I think that's an interesting topic, but not really the topic for today. We're talking about budget, and we're talking about our watch collecting philosophy as we are entering 2026 and refining that. So that's one piece that I'm looking at. Another piece I mentioned, I think in the last podcast, the Vacheron Constantin K. Delisle. Of course, I'm looking at the one in blue. There's white and black that are very reasonable, and there's lots of examples of them out there. So another really, really great watch. Obviously, true high horology there. You're getting a Holy Trinity watch. You're getting a full manufacturer movement and really a spectacular piece there. So those are a couple pieces on my radar for the year. But again, I don't know where I'm going to end up because I've got these other financial priorities. And so I do think that budget is an aspect of where you start because you cannot consider things that are way outside your price range. Um, for instance, I enjoy some Patek Philippe models. I do think that there's obviously plenty of them that are a little overhyped. Of course, there's all the Nautilus models, which candidly I don't think is that good looking of a watch anyway. To be fair, I haven't seen one in person, so again, maybe seeing it in person, having it on the wrist would change my mind. But just visually, I think there are much more attractive looking watches than the Nautilus. Some people may disagree with me. That's okay, but that's just my take on it. So, but point being is if you're not ready to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a watch, and if that's not in your budget, there's no point in considering those watches. Again, you may look at them aspirationally, but you don't need to own a Patek just to own a Patek or a Rolex just to own a Rolex. I do think budget is a major factor, and that's why I think it's the first thing to talk about when we're getting into the idea of watch philosophy and a collecting philosophy. So it shouldn't be at the expense of your long-term financial goals. If you can't do it concurrently with what your savings, investing, paying off debt, whatever it is, goals that you have, I mean, arguably, if you're paying off debt, you probably shouldn't be looking at luxury watches. You should probably be paying off the debt, but I'm not going to become a financial advisor. I'm not a financial advisor, disclaimer. So just keep that in mind. So that's the first piece. Next would be the use case. And here I think it's have a reason to own it other than that it's popular, other than it's in the conversation of watch collectors. I mean, like have a reason that's meaningful for you to own it, and don't buy the same watch over and over. Now, there's a lot of room for individual circumstance and individual self-expression here because I know collectors that have multiple versions of the same watch that have different dial variants and different metal variants of the same watch. I know that's a thing. I know people do it. I know that there are people that have sub collections within their collection, right? So they have a extensive watch collection and they've got a whole sub collection of Ulysse Nardin or Jaeger-LeCoultre or Rolex. I mean, there's people that are like Rolex monobrand collectors. That's a thing. They only want Rolex. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think depending on, again, what your level of means are, which is why I think the budget is the first thing, you've got to define for yourself what you're going to go after and be efficient with your finances, with your resources. So for instance, again, for me, I have a collection of 6. It's the most that I've had. I've had 6, I think, at one other point in my collecting journey. So I'm at the most that I've had. And for me, the use case really comes down to when am I going to wear it? Again, I professionally, I work in more of an office setting. I don't need anything that's super durable at work. So I can wear kind of some more dressy type of pieces, and I'm just fine with that. I'm not worried about damaging them or beating them around or anything like that. For you, if you're in that type of work environment, you may want something like that. So you've got to be mindful of what your use case is going to be. I like having a mix of both strap watches and bracelet watches, things that have water resistance versus things that maybe are a little bit less on that scale. A little bit more of dress watch pieces that don't have the water resistance. So having a use case that is relevant for you in various environments, I think is important. Now we're going to talk about design and aesthetics later on because I do think that that's an important aspect as well. Because the reality is you might have, the use case might be, I want to have different dial colors to wear with different outfits that I have. Or, I mean, some people that are at a different financial level than me are saying, hey, I want to match my watch with my car or whatever it is. And that's okay. It's one of the reasons why in my YouTube shows very often I'll say, my goal for you is to get out of watches whatever you want to get out of watches. And it may be different for the two of us, and that's okay. They're not always going to be the same goals, and they shouldn't be, because that's the beauty of the hobby, is there's a lot of room for individual self-expression, and I think that you should express yourself in that way. So again, just to give another example, I use the example of like the Omega Seamaster 1200 meter Plo Prof. It's a professional diver's watch, for God's sake. I'm not going to dive with it. I'm not diving. I don't even like going in the water on vacation. My fiance can tell you that. And but I still like the watch. I like the modern aesthetics of it. It's a little bit of, like, there's some technology in there, obviously with not just the water resistance, but it's got a timing bezel function on it. It's got this kind of like interesting style design case shape to it. If you've not seen an Omega Plo Prof, just look it up. It's a really interesting case shape and design. So I like that. And I also love my Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Ultra Thin Perpetual Enamel. I've talked about that watch in prior videos and episodes, because it just has a super symmetrical dial. It's very modern looking. Of course, there's the craft artistry of like the guilloche work and the enamel. So the use case for those two watches is extremely different, even though I might wear either one of them in some similar situations. Like, I can wear both to work. I can wear both on a Saturday when I'm just kind of relaxing or doing errands or whatever I'm doing. And so having watches that don't overlap are important. I had at one point, I think I shared, I was looking for an Omega, to get an Omega back in the collection, because the one that I had actually traded in towards my Jaeger-LeCoultre when it became available, because I wasn't going to miss the opportunity to jump at it. And so when I was looking at Omegas, I found this Omega Seamaster, and it was a London boutique edition Seamaster. They made 4 city editions. I can't remember all the cities, but basically each city edition was a different color. The design was kind of the same, so it was kind of this sleek, more modern looking, but still kind of a vintage inspired Seamaster design, with these like dart style indices, and they had these really cool like fume fade dials. The London one, of course, was a blue fume fade dial design, which I really liked. And so I remember seeing this watch, and I said to myself, I've got to have it. It's the perfect Omega for me, and I know I've been wanting to get an Omega back in the collection. And so I ended up buying it. And I will never forget when I got, sorry, my dog's just kind of wandering back here. I'll never forget when I got that watch. I remember getting it, and I was so excited. I mean, I put it next to my JLC, and I was like, it's a perfect combo. Like, they both work together, but they're different watches, so like I'm going to enjoy this a lot. And I remember wearing the Omega early on when I first got it, and I was like, I feel bad that I'm not wearing my JLC. I waited for so long and yearned after this JLC for years. And finally I got it. And then I get this Omega, and it's almost getting wrist time that I feel like my JLC should be getting. And so that's what I mean when I say, don't buy the same watch over and over. Like, I realized it was actually so similar to my JLC that it was kind of replacing it, and I didn't want to replace it, because the JLC is just a freaking awesome watch. So that's what I mean when I say don't buy the same watch over and over. There again will be people that can do that, and they have very different relationship with their watches or number of watches, and so they don't mind having that. Or again, if your lifestyle, I don't want to say is one-dimensional, but if you're like, I really want kind of the same type of watch most of the time, that could be okay to have watches that overlap in that way, because you're just going to like wear a different one every day, or you're going to have a different one for every day of the month, or whatever it is. Or in some cases with some really, really prominent collectors, they have a different watch for every day of the year. And that's amazing. And I don't know that I'll ever get to that level or aspire to, candidly. But so that's where I think the use case becomes really, really important. So you've got to figure out what that looks like for you. When are you going to wear certain ones? Again, I like having a couple bracelet watches because they do tend to be more my weekend casual watches. And then my dressier pieces I tend to wear more so during the week when I'm at work, things like that. So, and then I have my Dan Reuter, my DR02. It's the only watch in the collection that I wear every day, and it is absolutely my fitness workout gym watch because I love the chronograph function when I'm at the gym. It's great. I can time rest sets. I can time my whole workout. I've used it in a variety of applications there. So that's kind of the shtick on use case for me. Now, let's talk about brand. So far we're at budget. It's got to be within your price range. Otherwise, what's the point? The use case has to matter. It has to be purposeful. It has to be intentional. Because if you're not going to use it, or if it's overlapping too much with another watch, that might create some challenges for you. And I think with that Omega, like I was talking about before, I think I ended up selling that and trading it in within 30 to 60 days because of the fact that I didn't want to wear it because I wanted to wear the JLC. Now, at least with the Girard Perregaux that I have, it's got an aventurine dial. I think it kind of punches at the same weight class as the JLC, so I think that matters too. But anyway, the next thing we're going to talk about, watch collecting philosophy, is going to be brand. And I have a lot of thoughts on brand. I got to talk about Rolex. I'm wearing my Sky Dweller today. It continues to be one of my favorite pieces in the collection, which I honestly feel like I say that about every watch because I really am selective about what I bring into my collection. But Rolex gets a lot of unnecessary hate, and it honestly bothers me sometimes because I think that there's a little bit of a cultural stigma against any company that's big. We've seen this in tech. We've seen this in probably the financial world a bit. And I think Rolex is the watch brand that also deals with this. Just because it's a big brand doesn't mean that it's done something predatory or at the expense of anyone else or at the expense of any other brand. Because let's be honest, the luxury watch industry continues to grow. And that's not because it's taking away from some other industry. It's people have disposable income that they're spending and they like and want luxury items. That's what they're wanting and looking at because of many things. It's a lot of marketing. There's a lot of status associated with it. We see celebrities wearing these watches. I mean, there are Instagram channels dedicated to basically posting pictures of celebrities wearing watches and then saying what the watches are and how much they cost. You've all seen them if you've been around the watch space at all. And so I do think that Rolex has kind of taken the brunt of that. Some brands, it's kind of like, oh, this celebrity was seen wearing a really unique Patek or a really unique AP or those types of things. And I do think that it depends on the brand, how it's being perceived and how it's being talked about. And that's why I do think that Rolex tends to get a little bit of the flack here because there are a lot of celebrities wearing Rolex. There just are. And going to the brand association, which I do talk about when it comes to luxury collecting, is the associations that you have with certain brands matter a lot. So I grew up with sports, and I've mentioned this a little bit before, but I grew up playing golf for many, many years. And then later, I didn't really play tennis. I mean, I played it a couple times casually here and there, but it was more so I liked watching tennis. It was just something that I always enjoyed. And I liked the athleticism of it. I mean, I liked the competitiveness of it. I've always been a little bit more of an individual sport type of person versus like a team sport type of person. So there's a lot of elements there that resonated with me. But with golf and tennis in particular, Tiger Woods was like one of my childhood heroes, absolutely. And I mean, he inspired me a lot. And then later on, I was a big Roger Federer fan. I mean, like for various reasons, I think just like the personality that he had kind of on and off the court, the aesthetic, just kind of this like suave, like worldly type of guy. It just was appealing to me, and I think we all have those people in the public eye, in the public sphere that we look up to. And I remember in hindsight, actually, so like I got my Sky Dweller in 2020, and I remember maybe a year or so after, I remember kind of reflecting a little bit and thinking back, and I stumbled across an old Sky Dweller advertisement that there were actually two separate ones, and Roger Federer and Tiger Woods had both been part of these Sky Dweller ads, and they were from when the watch was originally released in 2012 in the precious metal variants, and they weren't super popular at first because they were so expensive. The Sky Dweller really didn't start to gain more popularity until 2017 when the steel models came out, but Roger and Tiger both did these Rolex ads for the Sky Dweller because obviously they're traveling all the time. And I remember seeing those again after I had already gotten my Sky Dweller and just thinking like, okay, that's really funny to me that I remember seeing these like way a long time ago before I was even in the market for anything close to a luxury watch. But just because I had those associations with those athletes, it had a big impact on my psyche in the sense of this is not only the brand that I was interested in, but even the specific model. And there are other reasons too, right? Like I'm big into tech. Like I really enjoy technology, and the fact that the Sky Dweller has the ring command bezel, I've talked about that before. That was always a really attractive thing to me. The modern design of it, the symmetrical dial design. We're going to talk about aesthetics. Those things always kind of appealed to me. And so I think all I'm saying with this is you're going to have associations, and I actually think I push in the opposite direction of most people in this conversation, because I think a lot of people look at that and they say, well, that's just marketing. That's just BS marketing. And, you're buying into the whole, Rolex marketing message and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but they're also really good watches. So like, what are we talking about here? Like, we're spending thousands of dollars on a timepiece that no one needs. So we're already having that conversation. And then we're saying, okay, well, just because you're buying something that's popular means that you shouldn't buy it. And I go back to why are you buying it, and why is it popular, and why does it resonate with you? Because in my case, there were just some of my childhood heroes that are wearing them. And you kind of look up to those people in an aspect of your life. So that's cool. For others, it's going to be other, like, like there's some celebrity, like movie stars that are huge Breitling ambassadors, so maybe other people look up to them. And I think that's fine. So I'm actually like pushing in the other direction of embrace the associations that you have with some of these brands, and just try to understand it, because it's actually really interesting. And I think if you can understand that about yourself, it's actually going to make your collecting journey that much more enjoyable, and you'll appreciate the pieces that you have even more. Because I think we all have that in some respect, whether it was seeing a video of just like the watch itself, or having that, kind of marketing message of, hey, athletes wear this watch, movie stars wear this watch. Whatever that message is, if it resonates with you and you're checking the boxes on the other things that I'm mentioning, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think you should lean into that. And I think you should be happy with that, because it's your watch. There's no one else that gets to tell you what to do with your money and with your time and effort and resources. So it's your watch. You should enjoy it. And that's how I feel about my Sky Dweller. It still continues to be one of my favorite pieces in the collection. So that's kind of my thought on brand. Again, Omega JLC was another one that I shared the story. I saw it on a trip, and I stumbled into the brand. I mean, I was in a jewelry store that sold watches, and I stumbled into the brand. I don't remember anything about what Jaeger LeCoultre models I was looking at. What I do remember are the sleek design, the dart style indices, the Dauphine hands that had this look of precision to them. And then later on, I learned more about like the heritage of JLC and how they made movements for other brands like AP and just the various like watchmaking accomplishments that they've had. Everything from creating an icon like the Reverso to leveling up and doing some real high-end stuff with like their Hybris Mechanica. Like for instance, they had the quad face Reverso that they came out with. They had the Westminster Sphero Tourbillon minute repeater. Like just stuff like that. That's just like, okay, they're putting a ton of time and effort and energy into this to make these beautiful watches. And it's not just a bunch of complications thrown together. I do think we've seen a little bit of that. Again, I'm not here to critique any particular brand, but I do think that there's an element of some brands just putting complications together for the sake of complications, and to me that's not really interesting. I mean, it's cool from a engineering standpoint, but if I'm going to buy a watch, I would rather have something like the Grand Seiko Kodo, for instance. Like that was a really cool watch, and it was innovative in what they did. So things like that, I think, play into the brand association for me, and I think they do for you as well. I think it's more so just becoming aware of what those are. Last thing that we're going to talk about with watch collecting philosophy and focusing on this for 2026 is the design. I've mentioned it before in terms of my own collection, and I do think that it matters because we are trying to express something with everything that we're doing. Everything that we're putting on, the car we drive oftentimes, the jewelry or accessories we wear, very, very often there's an element of self-expression that we're going for, particularly when it comes to watches, even something as simple as the color of the dial. I can see it, and it's really interesting, and I'm intrigued by how people approach it differently. Like I've seen some people in some of the watch groups I'm in that they love the aesthetic of like a black dial, maybe white hour markers, just that very clean black and white type of aesthetic, and it's super clean. And I relate to it, honestly, because my old JLC Master Ultra Thin Moon was the black dial version of it. I thought that was really interesting. So I think those are that's an example of like a design aesthetic of that's what that person's trying to express. There's an element of modern, clean look. Then there's other people that are kind of like some of these more rugged watches, like the Devon Tread or the Urwerk models, even some UN models, like some Ulysse Nardin models. They're very, very rugged, and it's really interesting to see how people are attracted to certain models and certain brands, because it's just very different than what I'm into. And so I'm always intrigued at how people kind of go after that whole aesthetic when they're looking at their watch collection. And some people do mix them. I mean, some people have very dramatically different types of brands and models in their collection, which is also fun too. I think, in that respect, I think I am a little bit more reserved, a little bit more sleek, modern types of pieces, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that's where the design and what you're trying to express, I think, also is just an interesting exercise. It's also an interesting thing to be aware of, because you're always going to be expressing something in what you wear. Always. Don't kid yourself about it. We often rationalize to ourselves, especially as collectors, that the reason we're buying this watch is because it's, again, it's got this crazy technology, or, like most of those things, when we get to that conversation, are really rationalizations for why we need these pieces. They just are. Because again, you can do the same stuff with your phone and you'll be just fine. So anytime you're talking about spending that kind of money on a watch, and it's not wrong, right? I mean, there are reasons that we're coming up with, but very often a lot of it is that, again, brand association, and then what are you trying to express by wearing this piece? So those are my thoughts on watch collecting philosophy and how you can use that as a framework and as a track for yourself in 2026. Because again, I've made my stand very clear. I am a one watch per brand guy. I'm looking for blue. I'm looking for variety and use case and balancing out my collection. Again, even now, it's like I've got of the 6 that I have, I've got 2 primarily that I wear on bracelets, 2 that I primarily wear on more dressy, like leather style straps, and then 2 that I kind of have that are in the middle, where it's like they're on these kind of rugged, like rubber straps that I could wear them in the water, or I could dress them up, or like there's just a lot of variety in there. And I do think that with limited resources, again, I think variety will serve you well in terms of what to look for, where to go. And hey, like I know I talked about Patek in this episode a little bit, because there have been some controversial things, like when the Cubitus was released, Terry Stern, I think, made some comments about, who should be able to own a Patek or something like that, kind of this elitist mentality. And that's going to turn some people off. And I've always felt Patek was a little bit frumpy, in some ways. And that's why I'm not super drawn to it. They still have some beautiful watches, don't get me wrong. You can't deny, again, what they've achieved in the industry. But those associations, the cultural things that you hear about, that you read about, that you experience, that's going to influence what watches you will want to buy, what brands you'll go after. And that's choose the personal connection you have with the brand over the hype. It's going to win every time. And there's no point in buying a watch if it's just going to be something that looks pretty. Like, buy a watch that you're going to wear. Don't keep it in a safe. Don't be afraid of it. I understand, again, folks that have super limited or like piece unique type of watches, I get why they may have hesitation to even wear them. But at the end of the day, these are things that it's artwork. It's self-expression. It's something that you want to be able to use. And there's a reason that you're buying them. And so I think just being honest with yourself about what those reasons are will go a really long way in your collecting journey. So thank you again for taking the time to join me in this episode. Again, check it out on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're seeing this. Do subscribe, like the video if you enjoy this content. And my goal is for you to get out of watches, whatever it is that you want to get out of watches, because I want you to know and love the watches that you already have so that you can be a satisfied watch collector. So thanks for stopping by, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.